Welcome to 3am Tales Radio, where every story will take you beyond fear and mystery in the darkest hours of the night. Get ready, because when the clock strikes 3 a.m., every shadow has something to tell. First story, The House of Seven Signs. The House of Seven Signs. This happened a long time ago, around 1991 or 1992. In our neighborhood lived a tenant named Mark Evans. He worked as a mechanic in a two-wheeler company. Mark was an atheist by nature, while his wife Linda and their children were deeply religious. Their biggest fights always happened because of religion. Whenever there was a sermon, a spiritual gathering, or a devotional choir in the neighborhood, Linda never wanted to miss it. She said it brought blessings to the family. But Mark believed it only disturbed daily life. What many people didn't know was that Mark was not always an atheist. Whenever he passed a church, he would still lower his head out of habit, something I had noticed for years. Linda always dreamed of owning a house, and fate favored her. They finally got a home loan approved and bought a nice house located on the outskirts of Bristol, England, and that is where everything began. Mark completely refused to perform any prayers, rituals, or blessings when they moved in. On the very first day, while hanging a picture frame on the wall, the nail slipped and drove deep into his palm. Blood poured onto the floor. He needed 7 stitches. Soon after, Mark had to travel out of town. When he returned, strange things began happening. At night, he would hear footsteps moving up the stairs. Sometimes he felt someone pass by his bed, even though no one was there. This continued for months. Then one day, Mark fell seriously ill, without any diagnosed medical problem. He often told Linda, "I feel suffocated," as if I just want to cry. He would say, "I feel like I'm an orphan, like everyone has left me." Slowly, the entire house became heavy and silent. Visitors would leave quickly, saying the same thing. "It feels like someone died here. I feel like crying when I enter." One afternoon, something strange happened. A street musician with a violin stopped in front of their gate. After staring at their son for a while, he asked to see Linda. When she came out, he quietly said, "Take care of your child. Something bad is coming, and leave this house, soon. If you can't, conduct 9 days of continuous prayers here, or nothing will remain peaceful." Then he walked away. A while later, Linda sent her son to buy groceries across the road. While returning, he was hit by a scooter. He survived, but needed 7 stitches, just like his father. From that day, fear filled the house. Linda wanted to hold prayers, but Mark refused aggressively every single time. One relative visited and said before leaving, "Sell this house. Something terrible lives here." Finally, after months of tension and arguments, they moved out. Later, Linda met an elderly woman from the town. When the conversation turned to the house, the woman quietly revealed, years ago, a young girl had fallen from the roof there and died. Not long after, another family moved into the same house. One night, due to a wiring fault, the entire house caught fire. 7 members of that family died together. Linda suddenly realized the pattern. The house carried tragedy, marked by the number 7. Mark never spoke about the house again. But even today, when the story is told, a chill runs through everyone listening. And one truth remains. When entering a new home, never ignore prayer, blessings, or timing. Sometimes neglect invites what we cannot understand. Second story, The Midnight Library, Emily's Haunted Encounter. Hello, friends. I'm Ethan Miller from a small town in France called Lionville, and today I want to share a terrifying experience that happened to my cousin. Her name is Emily Harris. This incident took place when she was doing her MSc at university and staying in the girls' hostel there. A few days before exams, Emily and a few of her friends were studying late in the university library. It was around 12:30 a.m., only 6 girls were inside, and the whole hostel was silent, completely still. Suddenly, one girl said, "We're getting bored. Let's play something. At least we won't feel sleepy." Everyone agreed. One of them, Sophie, said, "Why don't we try talking to a spirit?" She went to her room and brought an Ouija board with AZ, numbers 09 and yes, no written on the corners. She placed 4 candles around it and switched off all the lights. 2 girls got scared and left, but the remaining 4 kept a finger on the coin. Sophie said, "Don't panic, and nobody gets up, otherwise the spirit may get angry." Then she called out, "If there's any spirit here, please talk to us." The library felt darker, heavier. Suddenly, they heard a noise, like a book falling. Right then, the coin moved. Emily asked softly, "Is there a spirit here?" The ceiling fan, which was switched off, began shaking violently. The girls got terrified, but Sophie stopped them. "Don't run alone, or it may harm you." Everything went silent, and then all the candles blew out at once. Footsteps started echoing across the library when tap, tap, tap. The girls panicked and ran, but Emily was left behind and the door wouldn't open. Suddenly, she felt someone pulling her backwards. She started crying and screaming. Hearing her voice, all the hostel girls and the warden rushed to the library. Together, they forced the door open and pulled Emily out. Since that night, Emily still has nightmares about that library, and she has never forgotten what happened. And I learned one thing from her experience. We should never try to disturb spirits. It can be dangerous. Third story. The poem that knew death, Amelia's unseen fate. The girl who predicted her own death. People often say that the world is full of mysteries, and sometimes those mysteries walk quietly beside us. In Northern Ireland, there lived a girl named Amelia Grant. From childhood, Amelia was bright, talented, and deeply thoughtful. She wasn't famous, and even today, you won't find much about her on the internet. But Amelia carried a secret. When she was just 14 years old, on November 1st, 1995, she wrote a poem and gifted it to her father. That poem would later become the biggest mystery of her life. Her father kept the poem safely, thinking it was just a child's imagination. But it wasn't. Here is what Amelia wrote. I see my lifeless body tied with invisible threads. I feel attached because once it carried my soul. I'm gasping for another breath. Suddenly I rise, free at last. I fly higher and higher, leaving behind my wounded body, drenched in blood. Memories of 21 years dissolve. My final goodbye. My family cries below, but I fly toward my new home, alone yet peaceful, carrying dreams of another world. That poem haunted her father. Years passed. Amelia loved art, dancing, painting, and she considered her father and her closest friend, Sophia, as her best companions. Eventually, Amelia turned 21. Her father often thought about the poem and worried quietly. Something about it never felt right. Then, one cold night, November 19th, 2001, fate arrived. Amelia was driving back home. Thick fog covered the mountain road. Her car slipped and plunged into a deep ravine. She died instantly. When news reached her father, the world around him collapsed. Everything Amelia had described, the age, the scene, the farewell, that matched her poem exactly. Reporters later asked him about it, and with trembling hands he showed them the poem. I think, he said softly, she already knew. And one day I will join her in that new world she wrote about. How did Amelia write so accurately about her own death 7 years earlier? Did she sense something? Was it coincidence? Or was there truly some unseen force guiding her hand? Sometimes science has no answers, and we are left only with questions and silence. Believe it or don't. But the mystery remains. Fourth story. The Haunted Lodge in 1952-53. The Haunted Lodge in 1952-53. The incident took place around 1952-53. 5 hunters, Michael, Thomas, Richard, John, and David, went hunting in the forests of Missouri, USA. They were struggling to find a place to stay. The main post lodge was occupied. The caretaker told them about an old abandoned lodge deep inside the forest. It's in ruins, but there's water. If you clean it a bit, you can stay there for the night, he said. They had no other option, and it was getting dark. They reached the old lodge, cleaned one of the rooms, and spread their beds on the floor. Their rifles and shotguns leaned against the walls. After a simple meal, they started playing cards and eventually went to sleep. However, John couldn't sleep. Lighting a cigarette, he relaxed. Suddenly, he saw a hand reaching through the window toward his neck. He jumped up and screamed. The others woke up, but the hand vanished. He explained what he saw, but the others dismissed it. It must be your imagination, John. Maybe a dream. No hand could reach from that far. Sleep now. Nothing's there. Despite their reassurances, John couldn't sleep. The next morning, after breakfast, they went hunting. They only managed to catch a few wild birds, which they cooked and ate in the evening. Afterwards, they returned to play cards. Suddenly, they heard the sound of anklets jingling, like someone running. Who would be running in the forest at this hour? They wondered. Looking out the window, they saw nothing. They quietly had dinner and went to bed. John, however, couldn't shake off the memory of the hand. As he dozed off, he opened his eyes and saw the hand again, this time attached to a girl standing at the window laughing. He screamed. The others woke up. He explained, if I hadn't screamed, she would have strangled me. When they all went to the window, they saw the girl running into the forest, the sound of her anklets echoing behind her. Everyone realized that something supernatural was happening. The next day, on their way to hunt, they met some local villagers. The hunters told them they were looking for a deer. The villagers asked where they stayed. They said, in the old lodge. The villagers were shocked. You've stayed there for 2 days, and you are still alive? What do you mean? Asked Michael. That lodge is haunted, the villagers explained. The spirit of a young girl roams there. She kills anyone who tries to stay in the lodge. Whose spirit is it? Asked Thomas. She was the caretaker's daughter. Once, when her father was sick, hunters stayed there. She went to serve them food and water. They attacked her and killed her. Since then, the lodge has been cursed. Anyone who stays there dies, but somehow the gods protected you. Leave now and never return. Stay in the village instead. The hunters spent a restless night. That night, the girl appeared at the window and said, By the grace of the gods, you were saved. Never come here again. The next morning, they packed their belongings and left immediately, shaken by the supernatural experience. Fifth story, The Haunting of Hollow Creek. The Haunting of Hollow Creek. It was the month of August, a dark, stormy night. Occasionally, strong gusts of wind swept across the sky, and lightning flashed in the distance. Old Samuel Harper lay in his small cabin by the edge of a pond in Hollow Creek, far from the town. The pond wasn't very big, but during the rainy season, it overflowed, and thick grass and reeds grew around it, giving it a spooky, eerie look. Nearby, 5-6 large oak trees stood. During the day, village children used to play tag or hide and seek beneath them, while laborers or visitors to the fields would rest in their shade. That night, the wind had grown into a fierce gale. The branches of the trees crashed together violently, startling Samuel's cow, which clung to him for safety. Samuel mumbled in his sleep, patting the cow's belly to calm her. Thinking the cow was restless due to insects, he lit a small fire to ward them off. Suddenly, the light of the fire illuminated the cow's tether, and in that glow, he saw a woman standing there. His body froze as lightning struck the sky, illuminating her face for a brief moment. She was terrifying, yet familiar. Summoning courage, Samuel strengthened the fire, placing dry hay on it to light up the cabin fully. Now he could see her clearly. "Who's there?" he shouted, gripping a wooden stick for defense. But the figure remained silent. Then she laughed, a chilling, blood-curdling laugh that echoed through the cabin and the stormy night. Samuel steadied himself and spoke firmly. "Tell me, what do you want from me? Step away or I'll use the stick." The woman's voice trembled, but she spoke clearly. You are not afraid? I'll show you." Samuel realized something in her voice was familiar. His mind raced through memories of his childhood. Could it be Eleanor, his long-lost sister who had died decades ago? Flashbacks hit him. Eleanor had once played around this very pond, climbing the trees and frolicking with other children. One fateful day, a branch broke and she fell. Everyone thought she was just a child, and she was buried quickly, without proper rites. Now Eleanor's spirit had returned. She revealed to Samuel that she had been wandering ever since, protecting the area from other malicious spirits, though she herself was trapped in unrest. She recounted how she had been pushed by a malevolent spirit while playing near the pond, and how his ghost lingered, tormenting her even in death. Eleanor explained that the spirit world was hierarchical. Some spirits were kind and protective, while others were cruel. She herself acted as a guardian of Hollow Creek, protecting the living from harmful spirits. Samuel called the villagers, who performed religious rituals to finally free Eleanor. After the ceremony, the spirit of Eleanor disappeared peacefully, finally liberated. From that day on, Hollow Creek remained calm, and the villagers never forgot the ghostly guardian, who had watched over them all along. Sixth story, The Guardian Boy. Friends, this incident took place when my grandmother was around 15-16 years old. At that time, she lived in a small village in the district of Sunderland, England, where her maternal family also resided. During those days, groups of traveling performers and gypsies often roamed from one place to another. These performers would set up temporary fairs where there were more people and entertain the crowd with tricks and acts to earn money. However, not all of these traveling groups were harmless. Some bands of performers included thieves who, while performing fairs during the day, engaged in robbery at night. Because of this, the villagers were always careful and tried not to let any such groups set up near their homes. One day, such a traveling fair appeared not far from my grandmother's village. The village children often wanted to go there, but no one allowed them. The elders even forbade the children from going to the fields or playing outside during the afternoon. Naturally, the children were unhappy about this, but they had no choice but to obey the adults. My grandmother observed all this for about a month while the traveling fair continued. She wondered why these performers, who included thieves, were so concerned about the children The only explanation children received was, if you go there, the performers might capture you. For nearly a month, this shadow of fear hung over the children while the elders worried about the fair. Despite these restrictions, one morning around 10 o'clock, a commotion broke out in the village. It was discovered that a 10-year-old boy from a neighboring house had gone missing. The villagers searched everywhere but could not find him. Finally, all the men in the village gathered, armed themselves with tools and sticks, and set out toward the traveling group to recover the boy. At the boy's house, his family was in despair, crying and calling for help. When the men reached the fair site, they were shocked. Everything was empty, only ashes of fire pits and traces of tents remained. Now their suspicion turned into certainty. The performers had kidnapped the child. The villagers quickly formed a strategy. Since transportation was limited, the performers could not have gone very far. But not everyone was strong enough to fight them, so planning was crucial. They decided to divide into groups of 5, each heading in different directions to locate the child. The group moving west eventually found the performers' trail. They searched the group carefully but found no trace of the boy. Just as they were about to give up, one man went a little further for his daily routine. The villagers followed him, overpowered him, knocked him unconscious, and loaded him onto a carriage to bring him back to the village as quickly as possible. Once back in the village, the man was revived with cold water. Terrified, he initially did not speak. But under persistent questioning, he revealed the truth. The boy had been taken by the performers' chief to be transformed into a guardian of treasure through dark rituals. The villagers quickly summoned a renowned wizard from a neighboring village, who knew the secrets of these mystical acts. The wizard guided the villagers to a peculiar stone marker, instructing them to dig beneath it. After digging about 4 feet, they uncovered a hidden chamber, roughly 5 feet wide and 6 feet long. Inside were 5 large urns filled with gold and silver, and there lay the boy, dressed in fine clothes, his breathing weak, with a nearly extinguished oil lamp beside him. Everyone feared the worst. The villagers were about to punish the performers' accomplice further when the wizard stepped in and rekindled the lamp. The boy opened his eyes, safe at last, and gradually recognized those around him. The wizard explained, "This boy is now alive, but he will remain so only if he is kept in my consecrated place. Otherwise, no one can save him." This boy had been transformed into a guardian spirit of the treasure. The chief of the performers had assigned him this role, and only those with magical protection could locate him. The villagers ensured the lamp stayed lit and watched over the boy until the ritual was completed. Afterward, the treasure was partially used to build a temple and partially for the welfare of the village children and poor families. The remaining accomplices of the performers were captured and held for a week before being released, under strict warnings. In essence, these guardian transformations, though harsh, were historically used by kings and rulers to protect treasures. Only those who willingly became guardians in their youth could possess extraordinary powers, and their loyalty became their greatest strength. 7th story. Who is responsible? The same demonic face appears to us intellectually. In the Wound. This story is the testimony of a riot survivor, a commentary on that so-called civilized society which profits from every fresh tragedy and then sleeps peacefully in air-conditioned rooms. Through an anti-extremism conference, author Omar Velasquez exposes the naked hypocrisy of the bourgeois social class, the liberal reformers who never truly have answers to the questions of the victims. At the same time, he mocks the insensitivity of those people for whom communal violence is just another piece of news, like it was a very hot summer this year, or there was heavy rain this season. Here begins the real problem. The author sows doubt. He knows exactly how the devilish calculations work, how activists and organizations have no real cause before the riots, yet once the violence erupts, they suddenly find something to feed on for years. He also understands how politicians arrange the posting of officials according to ethnic and religious considerations before elections, a new mathematics where 2 + 2 no longer make 4 but 22. And yet, in The Wound, when the narrator finds himself part of that same privileged society, we should not praise it as honest self-confession. Instead, the survivor should ask, "Why are you avoiding my questions?" But rather than asking this, the survivor merely shows the open wound on his head, letting the blood speak for him. That wound stays in our mind throughout the book and pierces our soul completely in Spirits of the Riverside Camp. The collection can broadly be divided into 2 types of stories. Those that focus entirely on extremism and riots revealing destroyed humanity, and those that, through unnamed ordinary characters, quietly ridicule political power structures, exposing hypocrisy and forcing society to confront its reality. Take The Arrest, for example. A character named Marco sells his blood to support his family. When the president visits town, a local female politician wants it to appear that she donated blood first, so that her picture will appear beside the president. Marco is used. The doctor, nurse, and attendant divide the money among themselves, and Marco is left nearly empty. While photographers capture the politician smiling proudly, Marco lies hidden beneath the bed, his blood still draining. He dies and suddenly becomes a hero. This is that brutal form of politics which squeezes people from the margins until death. Another character, Sam, survives only because he shouts, "I belong to the majority." That cry itself reflects one of the darkest tragedies of the modern republic, echoed again years later in the massacre that followed the fictional Norville train incident. It was after this that Spirits of the Riverside Camp was written. Omar Velasquez's stories refuse false hope. He knows that once livelihood is destroyed, death becomes the only option. In Responsibility, we witness a family suicide. Even if the author never actually met such a family in real life, the way imagination turns into harsh truth here cuts deep. In his final suicide note, David Rowan writes, "No one is responsible for my death or the death of my family. Every day, countless Marcos and Davids disappear this way. The question remains, who is responsible?" The author raises this again and again. In the dialogue between master and disciple, the disciple asks, "Who is responsible for riots?" The master finally blames the people, and the people means all of us, which in the end means no one. Neither God nor the devil. The collection ends there, with the devil relieved, knowing that humans no longer blame him. Later, he hears that even God came and said the same thing. The book ends with a heavy heart, the question still hanging, who after all is responsible? There is also the set 10 stories of Mr. T.P. Devlin, reminiscent of Brecht-style narratives, witty, sharp, full of satire. Other pieces, like Developed Nations, reveal the circular logic often used by right-wing politics. And in Cultural Progress of Our Wives, the author exposes double standards. Men advocate freedom for other women, but refuse to allow the same for their own wives. In this fourth collection, Velasquez's language is sharper, more rhythmic, and more poetic. His stories must be read not only for what is spoken, but also for what remains silent between sentences. Like good poetry, each reading reveals another layer, each layer another truth, another shadow of pain, another warning that if we laugh today, it is only because tragedy has not yet reached our door. Meanwhile, the devil continues writing his poetry, fearless, because he knows no one will ever truly blame him. Eighth story, Return from the Pyre. This story still sounds unbelievable to me, completely made up, almost like a legend. But the people who narrate it swear that it is absolutely true. The incident supposedly happened about 55-60 years ago, and the man to whom it happened passed away 5 or 6 years later. I never met him, of course. The event had already faded into the past. Before I tell the story, let me share the claim people make. A man who had been declared dead came back to life. Almost 7-8 hours later, right when the funeral fire was about to be lit. You could say perhaps he was never truly dead, but what shocked everyone were the things he said afterward. He confidently claimed that he had actually died, and that messengers of the afterlife returned him on orders from their Lord. Let's go through it from the beginning. Near our town, there was a village called Rivershire. There lived an elderly priest named Father Leonard, about 70, but still active and healthy. One winter afternoon, when the cold was at its harshest, Father Leonard sat outside his house on a wooden bench, warming himself in the sun. Suddenly, he felt a strange wave pass through his body. Before he could understand or steady himself, he fell straight off the bench. His granddaughter, who had been playing nearby, ran inside calling her mother. Very soon, the entire village gathered. A few elderly men checked Father Leonard. His body had gone cold, his pulse still. They declared that he had passed away. Preparations for the funeral began. Wood was collected, a bier was built, and by evening, they carried him to the riverbank for cremation. Because of the biting cold, everyone hurried. The pyre was arranged, the body placed, the rituals performed. Father Leonard's eldest son circled the pyre and bent forward to light it. When suddenly the pyre moved. People screamed and ran. But the eldest son stayed, trembling yet determined. He removed some pieces of wood from the head and froze. His father's face was red, sweating, and his eyelids were fluttering. He shouted, "Don't be afraid! Father is alive!" Some people thought it was a ghost and backed away farther. Ignoring everyone, the son lifted his father carefully. laid him beside the pyre, and poured water into his mouth. Gradually, Father Leonard began breathing normally. They carried him home in a wagon, called a local doctor, and after a few days, he was completely fine, as if nothing had happened. News spread everywhere. The priest from Rivershire died and came back from the funeral pyre. People from distant places came to see him, curious and amazed. About 10 days later, neighbors were again discussing the miracle. Some argued he had not truly died, only fainted deeply. Others insisted they had personally examined him and he had been cold and lifeless. At that moment, Father Leonard came outside and quietly said, "No, I truly died." He then described what he remembered. When he fell from the bench, everything went dark. After some time, he felt people lifting him. When he slowly opened his eyes, he saw himself flying with 2 or 3 strange-looking men. Soon they reached what looked like a royal court, a great hall. A tall man with markings on his forehead stood reading from a large book, while a massive figure sat upon a throne. They spoke for a while, glancing at Father Leonard. Then more attendants were called, and he was taken out again. Everyone there, he said, had shape, but no flesh, as though made of mist. A group of them carried him swiftly through the air. Later they separated, until only one remained with him. That figure first brought him to his house and looked worried. Another figure appeared suddenly, and together they carried him to the funeral pyre. Father Leonard remembered everything up to that point, and then complete darkness, until he awoke again. He believed the clerk-like figure in the court had said, "This is the wrong man. Someone else was meant to be brought." True or not, everyone in the region insisted Father Leonard never lied. He lived peacefully for another 5 or 6 years, often retelling the story. And one thing everyone noticed after that day, he was never angry again. He never fell seriously ill. He treated every visitor with kindness, as if life itself had changed inside him. 9th story, the promise that wouldn't die. Along the flatlands of the European countryside, there lay a serene village beside a crystal-clear river. Lush green fields stretched as far as one could see. At dusk, herds of cows and goats grazed quietly near the riverbanks, calves leaping playfully while the cows lowed lazily. Shepherd boys played games, arguing and laughing, while farmers worked in nearby fields, finishing their plowing and weeding for the day. Women carried bundles of grass home, tools in hand, while somewhere in the distance someone hummed a rustic tune. Anyone who stood there and watched this peaceful scene would feel as though they had stepped into a golden dream, something unforgettable. Traveling east from the region of Silvervale, one would eventually reach a small village called Meadowridge. The village had several clusters of homes, and among them was one particular neighborhood called Barton Hamlet, where most of the families were descendants of old clerical households. Just a short walk away, the River Alden flowed gently past. The village had many small shrines and a quaint chapel on a small hill overlooking the river. One day, a group of foreign tourists arrived at Meadowridge. They fell in love with its quiet beauty and decided to stay for months. The villagers welcomed them warmly. Among the travelers was a young woman named Emily Foster. She had an extraordinary charm, graceful, kind, soft-spoken, and humble. Emily was deeply interested in culture and languages, and she had been studying ancient European literature at a university in Germany. She spoke surprisingly fluent local dialect and soon began helping villagers learn English and basic yoga in the chapel courtyard every morning. Slowly, Emily became the heart of the village. The person she spent the most time with was Daniel Harper, a local village boy. They would walk along the fields together, sit on the grass, talk endlessly, and laugh like children. When Daniel took the cows to the river, Emily would join him, washing the animals, humming songs, and returning home with him at sunset. They fought sometimes, but never for long. Somewhere deep inside, love had quietly begun to grow. Months passed. When the tourist group finally prepared to leave, Emily could not bring herself to go. The villagers begged her to stay, and so she remained. Mr. William Harper, Daniel's father, considered her like his own daughter. Emily continued teaching, guiding, and inspiring villagers. Many of the village youth went on to secure government jobs because of her encouragement, including Daniel, who passed the military academy entrance exams and left for officer training. When he completed training and returned on leave, his posting as an officer was confirmed. Mr. Harper placed his hand on Emily's head and said, "My only wish is that you become part of our family." Daniel promised that he would marry her once he returned from his first assignment. But fate had written another story. Daniel was deployed to a conflict zone. One day, news arrived that his unit had been ambushed. Several soldiers were missing, including him. After weeks of searching, the army declared them presumed dead. Emily shattered. She stopped eating, stopped smiling, and walked like a ghost through the village. She wrote to the government, insisting Daniel was alive. She could feel it. But there was no investigation. No hope offered. So she left. Without telling anyone, Emily disguised herself as a soldier and crossed into the hostile region where Daniel had last been seen. She fought fiercely, creating chaos in the enemy camp, until a bullet finally took her life. The army recovered her body and returned it. With honor to Mr. Harper, the entire village mourned. Time passed, and life began to return to normal. Then one morning, Mr. Harper heard the faint sound of anklets in his house. The stove was lit, and someone was cooking. A soft voice whispered, "Don't be afraid, Father. It's me, Emily. I've come back, and I will bring Daniel home, soon." Terrified, he ran outside shouting. Villagers searched the entire house. No one was there. Yet they too had heard those anklets, seen the stove burning, felt her presence. Later at the chapel, a wind swept through. The great bell rang on its own, and a woman's voice echoed, "Yes, I am Emily. I will not leave until I bring Daniel back. I promise no harm will come to anyone here. This village is my home now." From that day onward, people occasionally sensed an unseen guardian, gentle, protective, determined, and the question still remained, was Daniel truly alive somewhere? Could Emily, even in spirit, bring him back? Perhaps this story isn't finished yet. 10th story. The Spirit of the Summer Orchard, a ghostly encounter with a cow. It was midsummer, the afternoon blazing and silent. Robert Mitchell was returning from a nearby village after buying a cow that had just calved. The scorching heat had exhausted both the cow and her little calf. Robert wiped the sweat from his face, gently patted the cow, and walked along the dusty trail. A little ahead, he noticed an old orchard. "Let me rest there," he thought. "Maybe I'll find some water for them." The orchard was huge, dry leaves everywhere, thick bushes, and an eerie silence. As Robert stepped inside, the leaves crackled loudly beneath his feet. The sound itself felt frightening. He left the cow and calf in the shade and went in search of water. Soon he saw a small pond, but what he saw at its edge froze him in place. Around the pond, ghostly figures were fooling around, laughing, jumping, shoving each other into the water. Some had no legs, some had 5. One was covered entirely in hair, and a few looked strangely human, like men from the nearby village. Terrified, Robert tried to back away, then stopped. "Why am I afraid? I am strong. These poor animals are dying of thirst. I will face whatever comes, but I will give them water first." He led the cow and calf toward the pond. The spirits blocked the path. The cow trembled. Robert raised his stick and shouted, "Move aside. They are thirsty. I will not leave until they drink." Suddenly, a violent wind swept through the orchard. Leaves whirled, branches crashed, and then, out of nowhere, a beautiful, radiant young spirit appeared. In a gentle voice, she said, "Do not stop the thirsty from drinking. We too were human once. I remember, when I was a child, I got lost on this road. It was summer. I searched and searched for water, and I died of thirst." Tears rolled down her face. Even the cow stepped forward and lovingly licked her feet. At her words, the ghosts moved away. The cow, the calf, and Robert drank deeply. The water tasted like life itself. Afterward, as Robert walked out of the orchard, he turned back and saw the same spirit standing quietly beneath a tree, watching him with kindness. He paused for a moment, and then continued toward the village, perhaps hoping their paths might cross again someday. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Stay with us for more thrilling, mysterious, and spine-chilling stories. Remember, behind every story lies a secret that could shake you to your core.